Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about Obsession, and right from the start I have to say this. This is probably one of the best, if not the best, movie I will see this year. This movie is fantastic. It is creepy, emotional, thought-provoking, disturbing, and surprisingly deep. It is the kind of horror movie that sticks with you long after the credits roll. Before we get into the deeper themes, let's start with a spoiler-light summary of the plot. The story follows Bear, a genuinely nice guy who has been in love with his friend Nikki for a long time. The problem is that Bear is incredibly insecure and struggles to express his feelings. Nikki cares about him, but she only sees him as a friend. After an awkward and painful attempt to tell Nikki how he feels, Bear becomes frustrated and heartbroken. Earlier, he had purchased a mysterious Will-O-Wish stick intended as a gift. In a moment of desperation, he makes a wish that Nikki would love him more than anyone else in the world. Of course, Bear never expects the wish to actually work. It sounds ridiculous. It sounds impossible. But then something happens. Suddenly, Nikki becomes completely obsessed with him. At first, Bear is confused. He doesn't know if what he's seeing is real. Everything feels too sudden, too perfect, and too unreal. The woman who only saw him as a friend is now deeply attached to him. Initially, it feels like a dream come true. But almost immediately, the audience starts feeling that something is wrong. Something feels off. Something about Nikki's behavior doesn't seem natural. One of the biggest strengths of Obsession is how simple and effective the premise is. The movie doesn't spend hours explaining exactly how the Will-O-Wish stick works. It doesn't overload the audience with mythology or complicated rules. Instead, it focuses on the characters and the consequences of their choices. That streamlined storytelling allows the movie to focus on what really matters. The relationship between Bear and Nikki becomes the heart of the story. What starts as a fantasy slowly transforms into something uncomfortable, unsettling, and eventually terrifying. I also have to talk about Inde Navarrette's performance, because she is absolutely incredible in this movie. Her acting is phenomenal. She has to portray multiple emotional states throughout the film, and she does it flawlessly. She carries some of the most disturbing and emotionally powerful scenes in the entire movie. As the story progresses, we begin to realize something horrifying. Nikki doesn't feel like Nikki anymore. It feels as though the real Nikki is trapped somewhere inside her own body. Whatever is controlling her, whatever has taken possession of her, doesn't feel human and certainly doesn't feel like the woman we met at the beginning of the film. There are moments where the real Nikki seems to briefly break through. In these scenes, she appears terrified and desperate. She begs for help. She tries to communicate that this isn't her. These moments are heartbreaking because you can see someone trapped inside a nightmare they cannot escape. What makes the movie so effective is that Nikki's behavior doesn't immediately become extreme. The changes happen gradually. At first, her actions seem unusual but manageable. Then they become stranger, then unsettling, then genuinely frightening. The escalation feels natural, which makes it even more disturbing. The movie creates a constant feeling of uncertainty. Every new interaction leaves you wondering whether Nikki is still in control or if something else has completely taken over. That uncertainty creates a level of tension that never really goes away throughout the film. At the same time, Bear undergoes a transformation of his own. When the movie begins, he's easy to sympathize with. He's insecure, lonely, and struggling with feelings that many people can relate to. You understand why he's hurt and frustrated. But as the story progresses, Bear slowly becomes the villain of the story. The more he realizes what is happening, the more willing he becomes to ignore the consequences. He begins sacrificing Nikki's freedom, happiness, and ultimately her well-being to maintain the relationship he always wanted. What makes this character arc so fascinating is that Bear isn't a cartoon villain. He's a deeply flawed human being making terrible decisions. You don't agree with what he does, but you understand how he got there. The movie never asks you to excuse his behavior, but it does ask you to understand it. That complexity extends to nearly every major character. People make mistakes, people hurt each other, people act selfishly. People make decisions out of fear, loneliness, and desperation. The movie understands human weakness in a way that feels very authentic. One of my favorite things about Obsession is how it explores themes that go far beyond the supernatural plot. Beneath the horror story is a discussion about consent, autonomy, and control. These themes are woven into the story in a surprisingly thoughtful way. The film repeatedly asks difficult questions. What does love actually mean if someone has no choice? Can affection be genuine when free will has been removed? At what point does desire become possession? These questions linger throughout the entire movie. There are also parallels to situations involving alcohol, drugs, manipulation, and other circumstances where a person's ability to consent becomes compromised. The movie doesn't preach to the audience, but it definitely encourages them to think about these issues. More than anything, the film highlights the violation of consent. At its core, the horror isn't just supernatural. It's the idea of someone's choices being taken away. It's the horror of losing ownership of your own body, your own thoughts, and your own life. Another aspect of the movie that deserves praise is the cinematography. Obsession is a beautiful film to look at. The camera work is elegant, the lighting is atmospheric, and the visuals constantly balance beauty with unease. Even in quiet moments, there is often a sense that something is wrong. The film creates an incredible visual mood. Certain shots are genuinely creepy, without relying on special effects or loud music. The cinematography helps build tension long before anything frightening actually happens. It's stylish, modern, and incredibly effective. What I found especially interesting is that the movie almost functions as two horror stories happening simultaneously. The first horror story belongs to Bear. He finds himself trapped in a relationship that becomes increasingly overwhelming, possessive, and frightening. As Nikki's obsession escalates, Bear begins experiencing the consequences of his wish. What seemed like the perfect relationship slowly becomes something suffocating. The more attached Nikki becomes, the more uncomfortable and dangerous the situation grows. But the second horror story is arguably even more disturbing. That story belongs to Nikki, while Bear is dealing with the consequences of his wish. Nikki appears to be trapped inside her own body. She becomes a prisoner, unable to control her actions or make decisions for herself. The idea of being conscious while something else controls your life is absolutely terrifying. Watching Nikki struggle against whatever force has taken hold of her creates some of the movie's most emotional and heartbreaking moments. Because of this dual perspective, the film creates sympathy for multiple people at the same time. You feel bad for Bear, you feel bad for Nikki, then both characters make decisions that challenge that sympathy. It's a complicated emotional experience that keeps shifting throughout the movie. The characters are flawed, they hurt each other, they make selfish choices. They sometimes act in ways that are difficult to defend. Yet the movie does such a good job developing them that you can still understand where those choices are coming from. This moral complexity elevates the film above many traditional horror movies. Instead of simple heroes and villains, we get people struggling with loneliness, desire, fear, guilt, and desperation. Those emotions make the story feel grounded, even when supernatural events occur. The result is a horror film that feels surprisingly human. Even during its strangest moments, the emotional conflicts remain believable. That connection makes everything that follows significantly more powerful and disturbing. Now let's talk about the scares, because this movie absolutely delivers. Yes, there are some effective jump scares, but that is only a small part of what makes Obsession frightening. The movie understands that true horror comes in many different forms. There are uncomfortable moments that make your skin crawl. There are gross moments that make you look away. There are eerie moments that leave you feeling unsettled. There are unexpected moments that completely catch you off guard. The film also excels at building tension. Sometimes nothing frightening is happening on screen, yet you can feel anxiety building inside you. The anticipation becomes almost unbearable because you know something is wrong, but you don't know exactly when it will reveal itself. There is also a strong psychological horror element running throughout the entire film. The fear doesn't always come from what you see. Sometimes it comes from what you imagine. Sometimes it comes from what the characters are experiencing emotionally. As someone who watches a tremendous amount of horror, it takes a lot for a movie to genuinely make me uneasy. Obsession managed to do exactly that. Several scenes left me deeply uncomfortable in the best possible way. The film understands how to get under your skin. What makes many of the scares so effective is how relatable they are. Most people have been in relationships. Most people have shared a home or a bed with another person. The movie takes familiar situations and twists them into something terrifying. It forces you to ask uncomfortable questions. What if the person beside you wasn't okay? What if someone you trusted suddenly started behaving in ways you couldn't explain? What if the person you loved wasn't really the person you thought they were? Once the movie establishes its premise and fully shifts into the relationship horror aspect, it becomes incredibly intense. The story evolves from an interesting supernatural concept into genuine horror that hits with surprising force. By the end, I was completely invested. The film combines strong performances, effective scares, thoughtful themes, beautiful cinematography, and compelling characters into a package that feels both entertaining and meaningful. If you're a horror fan, I think you're going to love this movie. But even if horror isn't normally your genre, I still think there's something here for you. Obsession has enough character drama, emotional depth, and social commentary to appeal to a much wider audience. This is a movie that people are going to be talking about for a long time. It tackles complicated themes, delivers memorable scares, and leaves you with plenty to think about after it's over. For me, Obsession is one of the year's best films, and one of the most effective horror movies I've seen in quite some time. I cannot recommend it enough. If you have the opportunity to watch it, do yourself a favor and check it out. You won't regret it.